in time to borrow images to try and explain his time and what he sees on this particular day. So we're going to take a look. Well, Sunday we looked at the letter to the church at Sardis. We're looking at these letters, and I don't think on Sunday morning, just a heads up, I don't think on Sunday morning we're going to go beyond the 7 churches. I've got some other things we want to get onto, but I think here we might continue for a while in the book of Revelation. Anyway, church at Sardis, chapter 3, verse 1, to the angel of the church in Sardis write, and we won't backtrack and talk about that. You know what the angel image is all about. He who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars, again, the stars in the right hand, the churches. He says this, and this is to the church at Sardis. Jesus saying, I know your deeds, and that you have a name that you are alive, but you're dead. Wake up and strengthen the things that remain, which were about to die. For I have not found your deeds completed in the sight of my God. We talked about some of that on Sunday. I want us to move on to some things we didn't talk about. But he does say, so remember what you've received and heard, keep it and repent. And that's a common in all these letters. Therefore, if you do not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you will not know at what hour I will come to you. Here's the part I want us to zero in on, verses 4 and 5. And that's pretty much going to do what we're going to do here tonight. But you have a few people in Sardis. He's just issued this pretty wide-ranging, pretty broad condemnation, telling them to wake up, that they're incomplete, their work is incomplete, they've been quitters, that you have a name that you're alive, but you're not alive. In other words, you're living a lie. But you have a few people in Sardis who have not soiled their garments, dirtied up their clothes. And they will walk with me in white, clean clothes, for they are worthy. He who overcomes will thus be clothed in white. So there's a second mention of the white clothes. Will be clothed in white garments, and I will not erase his name from the book of life. And I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. Anyway, we're just going to confine ourselves to 4 and 5 tonight. And look at some phrases that I think of as having roots, okay? And their roots go deep into the Old Testament, okay? So let's look at some of that. First one, white garments, okay? White garments. White is a very prominent color in the book of Revelation. In fact, it is the main color in the book of Revelation. If you read Revelation, you know there's a lot of mention of colors and different things. White is the color. It is the color that is most prominent in the book. It comes from the word leukos. You know a word, and I hope you don't know it by experience, but you know a word, leukos, leukemia. Leukos is white. Hema is Greek for blood. Leukos is a word that shows up a lot. Now, in the New Testament, 26 times in the whole New Testament, the word white, leukos. But get this. Of those 26, 16 are in the book of Revelation. Well over half. That's significant, okay? That 16 of the 26 are in our book. Now, to go a little bit further, put a little finer point on it. 8 of the 16 in the book of Revelation refer to clothing. 8 times, use 16 in the book, 8 of those is a reference to white clothing. And the other 8, now see, I am a math major. 8 plus 8 is... The other 8 refer to the heavenly realm when the word leukos, white, is used. Okay? Look at that phrase. You have some people who have not soiled their garments, and they will walk with me in white, for they are worthy. The one who conquers, overcomes, will be clothed thus in white garments. Okay, so there's two of the references right there. Pretty significant again. Take a look at Daniel 11:35. We're going to play around with those verses, that verse 35 and verse Daniel 12:1 for a minute. And we'll see what John is doing here, because we're going to find out this is where he borrows the white robe imagery, the white garment imagery, okay? And they hook back. They have roots that goes back into this passage of the Old Testament. Again, the phrase, they will walk with me in white. And then that reference to white garments. You get another one in chapter 3, verse 18. Now, if you search it 16 times, 8 of those talking about clothes, he's pulling them from Daniel. Okay? So let's take a look at Daniel 11:35. Somebody have that read that for us.
Some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the end time, because it is still to come at the appointed time.
Okay, there's a whole bunch of things here that Daniel is going to repurpose in our section, okay? And we're only looking at 2 verses, okay? This is why we can't do a verse by verse. But look at what 35 does, okay? And similar thing in Daniel 12:1. You'll kind of catch the drift there too. But it's talking about the holy ones. If you look at the rest of Daniel 11, it's talking about the holy ones or the faithful ones. And some of the wise shall stumble, this version, so that they may be refined, purified, made white, until the time of the end. Elaine, what did yours say? Not time until the time of the end, but
Until the end time.
till the end times.
Make them pure till the end.
Okay. For it still awaits the appointed time. So a couple of references to time there. We don't want to skip over that. You've got time of the end, or end time, and appointed time. And there's a connection being made in that little bit of Daniel with being made white. Now, take a look in chapter 12, okay? Take a look in chapter 12, verse 1. And this version says, "At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people." We won't go back and revisit all of it, but remembering the idea that there are divine beings over nations, and Israel, Jacob, is Yahweh's inheritance. It's his nation. It's thought that the presence of Michael indicates that Michael is the great prince over Israel. Just like other nations have princes over them, rulers over them, which are bad. Daniel, this book of Daniel, will talk about the prince of Greece and the prince of Persia. Well, here, Michael is referred to as the great prince. And so the inference is that he is the divine being under Yahweh over Israel. Okay? At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble. See, we saw a time of the end in 11. Here it's a time of trouble, such as has never been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. So what have we got here? Okay? In Daniel 11:35, the time of the end, or the appointed time, is connected with the white robe or the white garment, or being made white, clothing being made white. There's that connection in 11:35. In 12:1, you've got the time of trouble. That loops back to 11:35's appointed time, or time of the end. And again, it's looping back to that being made white thing, okay? Now, you're going to see how Daniel takes this and puts it all together. Notice also, and we're probably not going to get to it tonight, but it is in the same Revelation 3, 4, and 5, a mention of the book of life. So it's very interesting that in Daniel 12:1, you want to notice the book. Okay? That's a clue that John is definitely drawing from this passage. And this is one of those cases where he's going to gob several things together. Okay? And he's pulling them from this same area. Okay? And the fact that the book is mentioned here, and then he mentions it in chapter 3, verse 5 of Revelation, tells you this is the pond he's fishing in. Okay? This is what he's doing here. Take a look in same chapter 12 of Daniel. Somebody look at verse 10.
Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand.
Okay. Talks about purification, specifically make themselves white and purified, or some of our Bibles say refined. Okay? So what have we got here? Well, you've got another connection. There's a connection in this passage between being made white and the time of trouble. Okay? The wicked acting wickedly, but you loop it back to verse 1. And so there's a connection being made there. All of this passage is using what, and we've talked about this before, is called Day of the Lord language. Okay? That's probably why John said, I'm going to borrow from that section. Because it's a Day of the Lord section. So there's a connection here with being made white and some time of trouble. Okay? In chapter 11, chapter 12. And clearly it's a Day of the Lord context, the end of days, that kind of thing. That's pretty easy to see. So where are we at? I mean, what are we to make of all this? These are all Old Testament references that he's using in chapter 3. So the white, this is number 10 on your sheet. The reason I numbered those is you can kind of see the progression of how John was probably thinking. You know, he thought one, then he thought two, and he went down the line. So white denotes membership. But it's membership for who? For those who overcome the time of trouble. This end of days, this Day of the Lord event. For those who overcome the time of trouble, they're going to be members. And the sign that they're members is the white garment. It's a sign of membership. It's kind of like, in this club, this is the way we dress. Now, think for a minute. Who else do you see in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, that when they appear, there's often a remark about their white garments?
When any of the old patriarchs showed up, or a lot of times even the prophets, or if they spoke of Jesus, he was clothed in
Right.
white.
Jesus, when he had the transfiguration.
The angels, Elohim.
Angels, divine beings, also known as holy ones. So there's all that layers of connection going on here. You see? That the white robe is signifying. It's signifying membership. This is what we wear in this club. And you get in this club, humans, which is a club where people dress like divine beings. Again, let's not get hung up on do angels really wear robes. That's not the point. It's what the people are trying to express. But membership, the white robe denotes membership for those that have overcome. Okay? Membership in what? The same thing as the other people, the others that wear the white robe. Holy ones. What we're calling divine counsel. The overcomers are part of that. That's what the white robe is signifying. Now, a lot of times, and it's not done for bad reasons, in fact, and there's nothing wrong with it, it's not wrong. But a lot of times when this is taught or preached, passages like this, where it says we get a white robe, and there are even tons of gospel songs about it. We shall wear a robe and crown, right? The idea is, oh, white robe means purity. That's fine as far as it goes. But it's a lot more than that. It's a membership signal. And it's a membership that you're in the same thing as the divine beings. You see? Because this is what they wear, now it's what you wear. Okay? If you are an overcomer. So the significance of the white robe, the white garment, that John is borrowing and repurposing, there's a day of the Lord connection. And more than we normally think about or talk about. We usually mean purity, and that's true. But there are a whole lot more connections than that. And we've just gone through some of it. Take a look in Daniel 12:10. Okay? Let's look a little closer at that. Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly. Okay? Again, there's a connection between being made white and the day of trouble. Very, very important. Now, let's push a little further. What happens to believers in Revelation? So you've got the white clothes connected with the end of days, okay? And it's all drawing on Daniel, but there's more. And John will use some more in this passage. It's a really, chapter 3, verses 4 and 5 is very dense and very layered. It's so layered that you would have to know your Old Testament well, but he did. And many of the people that received this letter did as well. So they would get it. It's harder for us. It takes us an hour to dig it out. They would have got it just like that, which is why he used it, right? But take a look in our chapter 3, verses 4 and 5. Okay? What happens to believers, to overcomers in Revelation? Well, one thing is their garments are made white. We see that, or they're being made white. All of the things that happen to believers in Revelation, like we're talking about in chapter 3, verses 4 and 5, it's all involving transformation. We will be changed. And it's detailing for us the ways we will be changed. Okay? So one of the things is garments are made white, and we've already talked about what that means, membership and all of that. Okay? But next bullet point. Take a look in Revelation 2, 26 through 27. Somebody else turn ahead to Revelation 3:21. These are other things that also happen to believers in Revelation in this transformation process that we will go through. Okay? This gets very, very interesting and very exciting. 2, 26 through 27. Who's got that?
And he that overcome and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations. And he shall rule them with a rod of iron, as the vessels of a potter shall they be broken of shivers, even as I received of my Father.
Okay, so at the top of that passage, it couldn't be clearer. In 26 and 27 of chapter 2, another thing that happens to believers is we are put over the nations. Now, we dealt with that last week at some length. But we are inheritors of his inheritance. Jesus gets the nations as his inheritance. Psalm 2. The Father saying to the Son, ask of me and I will give the nations. Okay? So the nations, which were disinherited, you know, when all the nations said, we want another name over us. Tower of Babel, Genesis 11. We want another nation. We want another name over us. We don't want to be under this name. And they were so rebellious that in the building of their tower, they waterproofed it. So that in case another flood came, we're ready for you, Yahweh. We're going to build this tower to reach to heaven and get there ourselves, and you can't do anything about it. It reminds me of the time my family, we took our one and only vacation when I was a kid. Because it was such an awful experience, I think, that my parents said never again. We went to the Great Smoky Mountains. And my brothers and I, we were very wicked. We caused our parents grief. And we had an old Belvedere station wagon, a Plymouth. And the back seat faced backwards. How safe is this? Anyway, it faced backwards. So my brothers and I were in the back seat, and it had a crank window. Again, how safe is this? That you could crank down, and the big back window would come down. Right? Crank it. So I was cranking it down and putting my brother's head and then cranking it up. And he was squawking. And so my dad says, he's driving, and he looks around, and he says something like, knock it off back there. I'm going to come back there and whale the tar out of you. Fatal error. Tactical error on my part. I said, you can't reach me. Big mistake. Big mistake. But that's essentially what they do when they pitch the tower to make it waterproof. Nya, 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 you can't reach me. That's how rebellious they are. But it's at that point that the third and final phase of the fall of humans is completed. You get 1/3 of the phase in the garden when they disobey, and death is introduced. You get another third in Genesis 6, where unbelievable depravity is introduced. The sons of God and the daughters of men. Unthinkable, with unthinkable results. And then here in Genesis 11, you get the third and final phase of the fall. We always think of the fall as coming in one fell swoop. It's the mercy of God that it didn't. But this is the third phase at the Tower of Babel, and what happens? The nations are disinherited. He divorces from the nations, and he begins the plan announced in Deuteronomy 32 that these nations will be assigned to the sons of God, B'nai Elohim. But Jacob will be my inheritance. Okay? So that's where that takes off. But the point of it is that he will use this one nation to reclaim the other nations. Again, look at the end of Psalm 82, where the wicked B'nai Elohim, sons of God, they will die like men, and Yahweh will take back the nations. Now, how does he do this? He does it through the Messiah. That's how he does it. That's how the nations are being reclaimed. That's what missions is all about. But anyway, that's what's taking place here. So we are put over the nations. The nations, according to Psalm 2, are the inheritance given to Jesus. He gains the nations from the Father, you see, in love of and to please the Father. He gains the nations. But then what does Jesus do? He turns around and shares those with us. Okay? And as it says here in 2:26-27, we are put over the nations, his inheritance. Now that's linked with 3:21. Somebody read that for us. 3:21. This is another thing that happens to believers. White garment, membership, put over the nations. But 3:21.
To him that overcometh will I grant to sit with me in my throne, even as I overcame and am set down with my Father in his throne.
Okay, obviously that you see how that's linked to being put over the nations. we will sit on his throne. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? Now, what is that a picture of? Well, it's a picture of shared rulership, right? He's definitely the king, but he delegates some of it to us. We share the rulership over the nations in eternity. That's what's going on over the people groups. His inheritance is the nations. He shares the nations with us. And that's exactly what you see, and we've looked at it in a little depth, Daniel 7:13, where the Ancient of Days gives the Son of Man, the human one, who is divine as well because he's riding on a cloud, and only gods can do that. The Ancient of Days gives to the Son of Man, the cloud rider, which Caiaphas, thank goodness, in the trial of Jesus, identified Jesus as the cloud rider, right? He gives to him the nations, an everlasting kingdom. And then what happens in Daniel 7:13? The Son of Man shares them with two sets of holy ones. Divine holy ones of the heavenlies, and holy ones from the earth. The very same picture that we see painted here. John is repeating it, but he's repeating it because he's borrowing it from the things he knows from the book of Daniel. So you see, it all comes together. But here's another thing that happens to believers. Garments made white, put over the nations, and you'll sit on his throne. Shared rulership. But there's more. 2:28.
And I will give him the morning star.
Short and sweet. Later on in the book of Revelation, the morning star is Jesus. He gives us himself without measure. Total fellowship, total immersion. Very much like the relationship between Father, Son, and Spirit. We have that kind of access. We have that kind of presence with him. Again, this may not jibe with some of the cartoon pictures we've got of what heaven's going to be like, but you're reading it for yourself. It's way better than the cartoons. It's way better than we've been told. And again, like an old gospel song, and the half has not yet been told. Okay? So the morning star, that's Jesus himself. But there's more. Take a look in 2:10. Somebody else get ready with 3:11. Somebody else with 4:4. They're essentially the same, but I want you to see that it's repeated because it is a theme without too much variation on the theme. 2:10. This is another thing that we get.
That's the one on the 228. On her version, it say they will have the same authority I received from my Father, and I will also give them the morning star.
There you go. So there's the authority thing too, the co-rulership, the shared rulership. Linked to the morning star, because you have the morning star, you have the morning star's authority. Isn't this crazy? I read this stuff and I think, I can't do these jobs. But apparently we will. 2:10, who's got it?
Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison, so that you will be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life.
Ding! Crown of life. There's a crown. We get a crown. How about 3:11? Who's got it?
I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have, so that no one will take your crown.
Different church, crown. What are we talking about? What happens to believers? Garments made white, put over the nations, shared rulership, throne. We have Jesus, access to Jesus himself, and, as you're saying, his authority. But crowns. We get a crown. Now, this is going somewhere that I'm sure you never thought about. How about 4:4?
And round about the throne were 4 and 20 seats, and upon the seats
Maybe we should make time, but tonight we're not going to. Isaiah talks about the elders. And they are pictures of all believers of all time. So that's us. That's us. And when we get into chapter 4, you're going to see that they each have a throne as well. Again, shared rulership. But for our purposes tonight, 4:4, another mention of crowns. Another mention of crowns. So what else do believers get? Crowns. Crowns. And it's interesting that John had the choice between two words for crown. There are two Greek words principally for crown. One is a word that we sort of know. It's come into our language. It's borrowed from Greek. Diadem. Actually, their word diademos, but diadem. And it means a crown. You know, the Queen of England, King of England has a diadem. All that gold encrusted with all those jewels. That's the diadem, crown. The word diadem, the Greek word we get diadem from, it refers to a crown that you get because you have won. Because you have won. But the word that he's using here is another Greek word, Stephanos, spelled just like the word Stephen with a PH, Stephanos. That's a crown of rulership. A crown of rulership that you get because you're in the family. Think again, like the kings and queens of England, you know, my son is going to be king after me, my daughter, whatever. It's a succession based on family. That is a Stephanos. That's the kind of crown he's talking about here. It's also a crown of victory, but it carries with it the idea of rulership. That's the prominent idea with that particular word for crown, and that's what John chooses to use. There's got to be a reason why he did. Again, we're thinking his thoughts after him, but all of this is churning in his brain. And he says, you're going to get a crown. You're going to get a Stephanos crown. That means you belong. Again, back to the white robe, membership. You're in the family, you see? And your rulership is based on your family relationship. Isn't that crazy? And we will, on that basis, share rulership with God. Now, here's where it gets super cool. All right? That was all kind of to get you ready for this. And I wish there were a quicker way to do this. There's not. Okay? I don't know one anyway. On your sheet there, a bullet point. Crowns are often thought of as a prize for winning. We often think of it that way. Like the Olympics. Even back in ancient days, they got the laurel wreath, a crown. They called it a crown as well. That was a diademos. Crowns are often thought of as a prize for winning. But if you take all of these things together, the white garment over the nations, the throne, the shared leadership, the presence of Jesus, the morning star that's connected with the morning star's authority, and crowns, if you take all of these things together, even though crowns are often thought of as a prize for winning, and that's usually the way it's preached, right? We shall wear a robe and crown. Woo, woo, woo. That means you won. It means you completed the race, and that's the way it's usually preached. Nothing wrong with that, except that it doesn't go far enough. It's a whole lot more than that, okay? Get ready. Here's what it is. Often thought of as a prize for winning, but if you take all these things that happen to believers together, again, throne, the robe, shared inheritance, all of that, what it's talking about is shared rulership with the God of the universe. And all of these things, the white robe, some of the other things, the images of divine beings sitting on thrones in council, in family, in consultation with Yahweh. We've looked at passages like that. Those are things that are usually the language of divine holy ones. So what we've got, what John is doing by gobbing all these things together, is he's throwing out this, that the language of the divine holy ones is applied to human holy ones, to loyal believers, overcomers. The language of the divine holy ones is now being repurposed for human holy ones, and that's you and me. See what's going on here? Now that's great, but it gets even better. I told you it's layered. Next bullet point, it all leads to transformation of the human believer into membership in and a participation role in God's counsel. You will, what it all means, if you put it all together, the way John has put it all together, the white garment over the nations, the throne, the morning star, the crowns, if you put it all together, roll it all together, we see that the language of divine holy ones is applied to human holy ones. And what it means is that this transformation of the human believer that we're going to undergo is a transformation into membership in and a participation role in God's counsel. That's what it means. But watch this. It's going to get even more. That's what John's language choice, his language choice of Old Testament bits. These are all just bits. See, we haven't seen one whole verse here yet. But what his language choice of Old Testament, that's where it's meant to lead us. That we will be members of God's counsel. We got the right suit on. We got the club clothes. And so many other things. All of this, these descriptions of us, what happens to believers, all comes in the message to the promise to the overcomers at the end of each one of these 7 church letters. And after these letters to the churches, and this is why I think we'll go on into it even if we don't on Sunday, but Revelation 4, Revelation 5, do you know what those 2 chapters are? They're a divine counsel scene. And we'll table that for then because it's thrilling stuff. But that's the reason he's got all these bits here that he's throwing at us. Because he's getting us ready for a divine counsel scene, Revelation 4 and 5. Where the divine holy ones are present, and the human holy ones are present. And guess who else shows up? The animals. So you get from all these 3 strains of living creatures, living beings, divine, human, animal. They're all there in the divine counsel scene. And a lot of the things that we've been talking about up to now about that, about the divine counsel and membership in it, when you see, now read Revelation 4 and 5, and go ahead and read it before we get to it next week. It's going to start to click like never before. You're going to go, oh, that's what's going on. Oh, that's what's going on. Oh, I saw that. Oh, I caught that. That's what's going on. Oh, that's who we are. That's what we're going to be doing. Anyway, 4 and 5 is a divine counsel scene. Now, I want to back up and spend just a few minutes on a very interesting phrase. It caught my eye, and I dug a little deeper. And that's the phrase, not only will we get a white garment in our 3, 4 through 5, but it says, very slight phrase, they will walk with me in white. So what's going on there? What's our friend John borrowed out of the Old Testament there? Take a look in Genesis 5, verse 22. Somebody else turn to Genesis 6, verse 9. This is where the things you already know, you're going to see how they very easily connect with this. You already know the answer. You just don't know you know the answer. Okay? Walk with me in white. What's that about? 5:22. Who's got it? Of Genesis.
Then Enoch walked with God 300 years after he became the father of Methuselah, and he had other sons and daughters.
So who walks with God? Well, there's a case. We know his name. Enoch. Somebody else walked with God. We could say Enoch was a special case because we know what happens to Enoch. He reportedly does not die a natural death. He was no more, for the Lord took him. Okay, now he's in a category by himself. Maybe Elijah's in the same category, but that's about it. So we could say, well, that's a special case. But look at a less special case, a guy much more like us, 6'9".
And Noah, it's found 9. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was just man and perfect in his generation, and Noah walked with God.
Noah walked with God. Enoch walks with God. Noah walks with God. Here we've got, if you overcome, you will walk with me in white. Well, what did those two people enjoy? Very special kind of fellowship. I mean, we only sing songs about it. I don't know what's with my brain tonight. I keep thinking of these old songs. Really, he walks with me and he talks with me. That's the best we can do. These guys lived it. They walked with God. That means intimate fellowship. You will walk with me in white. Membership. Membership has its privileges. And one of those privileges is you will have the presence of Christ. He's not going to be in an office someplace or in an unapproachable castle. No. No. Now, how does he do this? We don't know. But it is an indicator that God is a lot bigger than we can imagine. If he can walk with you and walk with you and walk with you for eternity, oh my goodness. Who have we hitched our wagon to? Walk with me in white. Yeah. Now stop and think. Okay, this, you didn't see this one coming. Okay? Now stop and think. Back to the white garments. Back to the gold crowns. Who gets those? Those are for human beings who overcome. We're told that, right? These are things that will happen if you are an overcomer. You will get the white garment, you will get the gold crown. We've already talked about what they signify. Basically, membership and co-rulership. Now stop and think about that for a minute. White garments are mentioned for angels and divine beings. Just like we will get a white garment. In fact, that's part of the line we're to draw back is we're in membership of that. These are these characters that wear white garments. Now we're wearing white garments. And again, the physical picture is probably not where it's at. It's what it's conveying. We're in the same club they are. We are part of the divine council. Because we get white garments and they get white garments. But again, white garments and gold crowns are for human beings. White garments are for angels, divine beings. Crowns are never given to angels. You never see an angel with a crown. You never see an angel with a crown. Crowns are never given to angels. And there's no place in the text, it never says, I will put angels over nations. Like it says about us in 2:26. Never says that about angels. And it never says, like it says about us in 3:21, it never says they will sit on my throne. That's never addressed to angels. Now, we're not going to take time, but the same thing could also be said of the image of keys and a rod and a sword. Overcomers get all of those things, as well as the garment made white over the nations, the throne, the morning star, the crowns. But there's also the keys, the mention of that, the mention of a rod, the mention of a sword. Those things, none of those go to angels. Only to human beings, never to divine beings. Wow. What's being conveyed here? We're told in the Psalms that we were made a little lower than the angels. But it appears that we don't stay that way.
Because we overcome.
Because we overcome. They are not overcomers. We are overcomers. Crown, super familiar. We're familiar with the idea of crown. Again, most of the times we talk about a crown for winning, a crown for that. But it's so much bigger. Co-rulers is what we are. We're inheritors with Jesus. With Jesus. What he gets, we get. This is getting crazy, isn't it? And that's membership in the divine council. I mean, I got chills running up and down my back right now. I think about this stuff, and I look at these passages. I did this early this morning. I was working through this, and I thought, God, you better transform me. Because if you do this now, I'll die. This will kill me. I can't take the shock. Wow. It does not yet appear what we shall be, but we know that when we see him, we will be like him. Because we'll see him just as he is. So that's what all of this is doing in that little phrases that has roots in verses 4 and 5 back in the Old Testament. In Daniel, in Genesis, the walking with me. That's what he's doing here in pulling all those threads together and balling it up. That's what he wants us to see. Because that's what he saw. That's what he saw. Now, it's a mention of the book of life in that same, I think it's in verse 5, I think. Chapter 2. We're going to table that. But just to let you know, the book of life is mentioned 6 times in Revelation. And I'm going to leave it there. For next time, we'll pick up there and push on into whatever we deal with on Sunday a little bit. But book of life is a huge theme. You'll see. It's a huge theme. And guess where John gets it? Old Testament. That's where he gets it. So, well, listen, we're going to sign off with that for our life.